Hello Spring. Today I'm going to talk about SpringBoard, a map and scenario editor for Spring. To begin with, go to the official GitHub page where you can see the essential documentation. The first thing we're going to do is install it. To do this, let's just grab one of the package builds. As I'm on Linux, I'm going to get the Linux build. So let's just click on this link. This is going to open Google Drive. So just click on the download button here and it's going to download it. I already have this on my computer, so I'm going to use the existing file. Now once you have downloaded it, it's going to be in the downloads folder like this. Extract it into a folder like this and open the folder. There's going to be a lot of files, but we're interested about this one single file. So let's click on this executable. It's going to pop open a window which is going to download any necessary files that we might not have. Once that is done, the editor is going to launch. So this might take more time if you don't have the required resources for you. So once everything is done, we're inside. First, let's navigate around this world. So to do this, you can use the mouse like I am. In the bottom left screen, you can see the buttons that I'm pressing. So in this case, I'm navigating with the middle mouse. Like this. You can also use keys. And you can use modifiers with those keys to make it, for example, slower like this. And to zoom in, yeah, you can use the mouse wheel as usual. So these are the basics of movement and SpringBoard. This is pretty much the same as in Spring, so if you've played any of the games, you should know how to do this. So let's see how this interface looks like. On the right part of the screen, we have basic editor controls split into 5 tabs. In the bottom, we have the status window, which shows the coordinates of the mouse, the selection, or how many objects we have selected, memory usage. We can also see here the list of previously executed commands. In our case, we haven't done anything yet, so there's nothing here. We can use the undo and redo buttons if we have done things then. In the top left part of the screen, we have the name of the project. Since we haven't saved it, there's nothing there yet. And in the middle, we have the start-stop button, which is useful for when you're actually developing scenarios. Alright, so this is the basic layout. Now I'm going to go through each of these tabs and see how they work around. So this is a basic SpringBoard. So there are no units, as this is not a game yet. This is just a map. And we're gonna look at the feature editing for now. So here we can see the list of features that exist with this map. These are basically these trees that you can see all around. If we want to add these trees, we can click, select any of them, and in the brush mode, we can just hold mouse button. It's going to be placing them as you drag it. If we hold the right mouse button, it's going to be deleting these features. We can also make them more dense by reducing the spread. So reducing the spread can be done by clicking on the field and dragging it, or you can actually click and input a number that you want, like, and press enter. Usually I prefer to click and drag because it's much faster. This can also be controlled with shift to make it slower, or with control to make it really fast. But usually you just want either shift or the basic editing. So with spread 39, the features are even more dense, and with something like 9, they're going to be pretty densely packed. So let's delete them for now, and let's say that we want to have multiple different trees, like in this case, so there are maybe 4 different types of trees here. So we can select with Control or with Shift, as we like. We can select the tree types that we like the most, and then we can just do the same thing. It's going to randomly pick the trees that we have and place them around. We can also play with rotation if we want to have random rotation and so on. So that's the brush mode. We also have this add mode, so we can add them one by one. Still, it's going to be picking from the random group of features. Add is pretty simple. So there's just the left mouse button. There's no right click here. The other thing we can do is we can select these trees, then we can drag them like this, for example. So press on any of the trees and just drag them around. We can also use Control and click anywhere in the map while you have a selection, and you'll be able to rotate a group of features or any objects, really, like this. If you Control and Shift, then you can make them stay near, like this. So let's delete them by pressing delete, and then we can, for example, take this one tree, or let's say these 3 trees, and then we can just press Control C and Control V to copy them as much as we like. If we're not happy with how many trees we have placed, like this, we can press undo. So undo is Control Z, like in most editors, and redo is Control Y. So this isn't anything new, but it's a nice feature to have when you're editing. Alright, so, and you can also place multiple trees or multiple features at the same time with add, like this, which can also be useful for some use cases. So another thing that can be done with features is you can look at the properties. So if you have a number of them or just one of them selected, it's going to show you these properties, and you can be very precise in where you want to place them. For example, you can be exact and say 2.6K, and it's going to be there. You can also play with angles here. These are things that you can't normally really see in Spring. And you can play with also with health, for example. That's pretty common, I think. If you want to have them in the air, you can do this, like you've done before. So just play with the Y-axis. And then if you want them to be back on ground, just press this button. They're going to be here. So that's pretty much the basics. If you have some more complicated objects, they're going to have more fields here. For example, units are going to have a lot more fields, but features are pretty simple, so this is what I have. Another thing that you might want to do is edit collisions. So if we go to the collisions tab, we can press on the show volume, and we're going to see the debugging information about collisions. So we can select, for example, a number of units, number of trees, that is, and then we can, for example, increase the radius. This is the gray circle, right? We can move its center and so on. So this is something that you might often do when you're trying to create these usable collision volumes, and you can specify any of these things as well. So if it's blocking, if it's colliding with projectiles, and so on and so on. And you can again get the normal view by pressing show volume again. So this is the basic of controlling objects. Also, you should know that if you Control C anything here, you can open an editor. Let's say like something like this. and then you can paste this information here. So if you want to see these fields in a text editor, that's also pretty neat, I think. It's going to show you everything that these objects have. Okay, so that's basically it. So the next thing is map editing. Now let's just delete this so it doesn't get in the way. So for map editing, however, we need brushes, but because brushes are large files, they're not included by default, and you can also specify your own brushes and so on. So essentially you can't do anything unless you download an asset pack. And if you go on the official site, an official GitHub repository, or on the official documentation, other works, you can find this section about assets, and you can download these core assets from this link. So click here, it's going to open Google Drive again. Now this is a much bigger file. If you go here, it's going to tell you it's 1.7 gigabytes. So that's pretty large, and if you don't need all this, you can probably create your own assets and use that, or you can use custom ones anyway. Download this, and I already did that, so I'm going to skip that part, but I'm going to show you how it's used. So it's a file called core.zip. It's in your downloads folder like this. You can extract it here. Then you can move this into the SpringBoard folder, into data. Then we need to create the appropriate structure. So let's create the SpringBoard folder. Now we need the assets folder, and we're going to move this into the assets. So if you have more than one assets, more than just this, you can just have separate folders. You don't need to worry about the original one. So let's see what's here. In the core folder we have a couple of things. We have these patterns, and they're used for height map, for textures and so on. We also have these large brush textures. They're based on a texture pack from NobiX, and these are the ones that I find work well. They're usually in three parts. So there's the diffuse part, which is basically the color that you're going to see on the screen. This is the normals part, which will define how light reflects, and also specular, which has the specular element of light. So this is how you would make custom assets. There's also the detail folder, which is not that important anymore, and the skybox folder, in which you can place custom skyboxes. So now that we have done this, we need to restart SpringBoard. So let's just close it. Let's do that now. So I'm gonna close it, and I'm gonna reopen it again, so it can use the newest asset pack. Alright, so here we are, same map, but now if we go into the map and terrain, there's going to be this core folder. So once we click here, there are the brush patterns as we saw a few moments ago. So you can basically place any image here, and you'll be able to use this sort of pattern. So to begin with, let's change the terrain, let's change the height of the terrain. Let's select one of the patterns. Let's, for example, go for add, and then we can see this tealish pattern on a map. If we press the left mouse button, it's going to keep adding the terrain. Now, a pretty often used thing is to have a slightly larger brush pattern, and you can do this by pressing shift and using mouse wheel. The same thing is usable for any of the terrain editing tools, as well as the object editing brush, so it's pretty useful to remember that. Okay, so yeah, this is how it looks like. This is the most basic kind of editing. If you press the left mouse button, the positive effect, so adding terrain is going to happen. If you press the right mouse button, it's going to decrease the terrain. You can play with the size of the brush, as I have, which is unnecessary. You can play with rotation, but since this is a circle, we're not going to see anything. So this can be done by holding Alt and playing with the mouse wheel. This is obvious when you have something like this, which is actually affected by rotation. So now you can modify a rotated rectangle like this. You can also play with the strength to make it faster. So yeah, something like this, and so on. It can be even negative, so if the strength is negative, you're just going to be reducing it like this. Remember, Ctrl Z is going to help you revert to the previous stage. So then there's set. So set is, I think set is even more useful than add, and it can help you sort of get the desired plateau or something like this. So let's say that we want to make a plateau here. To begin with, we first need to have set, which is a positive number for strength. Now, fortunately, the height is very low, so it's going to create these holes. Let's undo this. Since we don't want holes, we want to, for example, height which is at this size. We can try to input the height at this level, but a much easier way is to just press right mouse button, and it's going to set it at the value under the cursor. So, for example, it's around 700 here and around 500 here. So let's go for the 700. Let's reduce strength a bit more. We don't want it to go crazy immediately. Yeah, we can have these nice plateaus then. If you're editing height, you just remember to use F1 so you know how it actually looks like. So this is set, pretty useful, I think. Then there's smooth. So if you have, for example, a slightly, let's do something like this. You know, if you have these rough edges, then you can use smooth. Something like this to smoothen out the edges of the terrain. Alright. Alright, so this is height map editing. Now let's move on to texture editing. We need to first add a new brush. These are the brushes from the NobiX texture pack. It's going to treat them as materials, so you're not picking the diffuse and specular separately, but you're picking them as a singular entity. Let's see. Okay, there we are. Alright, so for example, something like this, this one. So you can also see which textures it has. It has a normal, a diffuse, and a specular. So for the paint element, it's just going to use diffuse and specular. The NTS is going to use the normal element. And as well as in the case of the terrain, you can pick the pattern here. So again, we're going to be able to paint now. Same thing like before, just press the button. The right mouse button doesn't have a different effect here, so it does the same thing as the left. There's no reverse effect for this. But you can always undo if you're unhappy with the changes. If you do not want the specular, so we don't want a specular, now it's not going to do that element. You can always add it later on. So you can choose if you want a diffuser. For them, this is just the specular, not very useful, but it's a choice. Much like in the other case, you can play with rotation. In this case, however, there are two things. So this is the rotation of the brush pattern, right? But there is also the rotation of the material. So in this case, we can modify. So let's do something like this. So yeah, these are two materials that are going in the opposite directions. It should be obvious with something like this, I guess. So you can even have some directed textures, if you will. You can play with other, fields here. Scale is useful, I think, to make it very small. Something like this. And you're gonna lose on quality a bit. And you can also make it very large. You can play with blending. This is useful, I think, if you don't want to add the entirety, but to make it sort of fade out. So let's do something like this. And there are other adders. Color is useful if you want to sort of mix color with the texture. Something like this can happen as well. And that's pretty much it for the paint editing. However, we have other elements as well. So filter is sometimes useful if you want to, for example, use blur, or blur is the default. You can see how it blurs the. I'm often pressing Ctrl Z to get in the previous stage so I can reapply. I said, unfortunately, this map doesn't have DNTS, so to use DNTS you need to set it first. I'm gonna skip that part. It's an advanced feature anyway. We can now delete parts of the map. However, now I'm applying it, but nothing is visible, and this is because in the settings element we haven't enabled that. So if we enable void ground, and if we go here in the void element, now we can actually delete ground. In this case, it's going to trigger some C below the ground, like this. And if you press the right mouse button, it's going to undelete it. If you don't want it to be shown anymore, go to the settings again and press void ground. We can also edit the metal map. The metal map can be seen by pressing F4. So these are the metal points in the map. If you press on add, you can add new elements. Something like this. You can click, you can change the amount, and so on. Yeah, there's nothing special or anything. You can also modify the grass like this, which might not work if you have an older version of the engine. I'm gonna just skip that element. So let's go on the lighting. This is also, I think, very useful if you're fine-tuning your map. So let's say you have a finished map like this, but you're not happy with how the shadows are falling. You can change the direction of the sun like this. It's very easy to see the effect immediately. You can play with the color and so on. So these are environmental elements you can change. Fog is also a useful one if you, for example, want to make the map much darker like this. Not sure if that's good for gameplay, but it's doable. And you can play with water as well. There's a lot of parameters here, but we don't have water anyway, so that can be done. In the logic tab, we have some sort of programming elements that we're going to cover later, and the miscellaneous can let us configure teams and alliances. So this is it for the introductory tutorial. I hope you weren't too bored. And in the next one, we're going to cover some sort of basic programming using SpringBoard. So, thank you.